Israel's ambassador to the UK has said absolutely no to Israel accepting a two-state solution with the Palestinians when the war with Hamas in Gaza ends. The two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is an internationally backed formula that envisages an independent Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, with East Jerusalem as its capital alongside Israel. Well, joining me now is Mark Regev, senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, who is live in Tel Aviv. Welcome to you, Mr. Regev. Was the Israeli ambassador to the UK speaking on behalf of the Israeli government when she said that a two-state solution is not on the agenda at the moment?
It's not on the agenda at the moment because we're fighting a war against a ruthless enemy, against Hamas. But
is it on the agenda in the future?
Well, for the future, we always say that the Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves and none of the powers that they can threaten Israel. And that is a formula that has been around there for quite some time. And of course, that second part of the formula, none of the powers to threaten Israel, that of course has received even more emphasis since the terrible October 7th massacre.
These marks by the Israeli ambassador to the UK echoes those by Israel's communication minister this week, who wrote on X saying, "We live in this country, the historical estate of our ancestors," saying there will be no Palestinian state here. It doesn't give a time frame. It doesn't suggest that that could happen in the future. But you're saying that as far as Benjamin Netanyahu is concerned, that he is open to a two-state solution at some point in the future.
I choose my words more carefully. Once again, it's his formula, all the powers to rule themselves and none of the powers to threaten Israel. I think
so they wouldn't be allowed to be a sovereign state? They wouldn't have their own police, their own security forces, you're suggesting?
They wouldn't, let's say, be allowed to have a military alliance with a country like Iran. They wouldn't be allowed to have missiles. They wouldn't be allowed to have any sort of military capability that could threaten us. This is not new, though. You should know that at the very beginning of the Oslo process, Yitzhak Rabin was then the Prime Minister of Israel. And he spoke very forcibly that he said the Palestinians could not have full sovereignty. He said it would have to be less than a full state. He said it would have to be demilitarized. He said Israel would have to remain in strategic areas like the Jordan Rift Valley and so forth. So it's clear that if one wants to have peace with our neighbors, and we do want to have peace, but it has to be based on strategic realities. And if you had a peace deal that wasn't founded on security realities, it'll be washed away by violence. Peace has to be founded on logic and on reality, and you can't make peace by ignoring realities.
2 days ago, Mr. Biden criticised Mr. Netanyahu's far-right government. He said it doesn't want anything remotely approaching a two-state solution. To what extent is Mr. Netanyahu's position, his rejection of a two-state solution, based on appeasing those ultra-nationalists in his own government, which have helped him form a coalition and helped him stay in power as Prime Minister?
And so he has right-wing coalition parties. And as you know, as of 2 months ago, when this war started, the coalition was expanded and includes the Centre Party as well. And so there are different voices in this coalition. But like in the British system, the Prime Minister is the first among equals. And his position is, as I've said, all the powers to rule themselves and none of the powers to threaten Israel. And I think that's a formula that a lot of the Israeli public can unite behind.
How does his position sit with that of Israel's allies? We've heard from the US say when this crisis is over, there has to be a vision of what comes next. That has to be a two-state solution. The UK Prime Minister, in response to those comments from the UK Israeli ambassador, said today Britain would be sticking to its long-standing position that a two-state solution is the right outcome. The EU also backing that stance. How concerned are you that the position of the Prime Minister there may be too far apart from your allies and cause a real strain in that relationship and their continued support for your country?
I think it's quite possibly more of a semantic disagreement than a substantive disagreement, because if we speak to the Americans and our British friends and people in Europe, it's clear to them that there have to be security arrangements. It's clear to them that there has to be a demilitarized Palestinian political entity if we do reach an agreement with them. This is not new. It's, as I said, it's been in the peace process since the very beginning.
But there hasn't been a peace process for many years, and since this conflict started with the attack by Hamas on Israel on October the 7th, it's been very clear from all of your allies that there needs to be an end goal, which is a two-state solution. What, in your government's view, is that going to look like then? One that you think will be acceptable to the Palestinian people?
One of the major problems has been, I mean, the Palestinians over the years, as you know, have had opportunities to establish a state alongside Israel, but they rejected it. They rejected it in 1937, they rejected it in 1947, they rejected it in 1967. And most recently at Camp David, they rejected very forthcoming Israeli proposals that were brokered by President Clinton at the time. And after that, Prime Minister Olmert put on the table a proposal that would have given them almost 100% of the territory, and that was also rejected. And I think Palestinians have to ask, why is it that at all these historic crossroads, when there was an opportunity for statehood, did they reject statehood? The deal was never good enough.
Those meetings...
And is it possible, Samantha, is it possible that they have a problem with the Jewish state more than they have a desire for their own state?
Many would argue that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu isn't serious about a two-state solution of any form, and that he hasn't pursued any of those policies since being Prime Minister for many years now. And those talks that you mentioned there took place under previous US administrations also many years ago. Is it the reality that there is needed a new leadership in Israel and amongst the Palestinians that is interested in pursuing a just peace and a just two-state solution for all, and that perhaps Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't the person to do that?
Let's for hypothetical, for debate, let's accept the presumption that Netanyahu is the problem, okay, just for the sake of argument. So why is it that Yitzhak Rabin didn't manage to make peace and Shimon Peres didn't manage to make peace? And of course, Golda Meir didn't manage to make peace? And Ehud Barak didn't manage to make peace, and Ehud Olmert. I mean, successive Israeli prime ministers have tried to make peace with the Palestinians, and it was never possible. So I think to say suddenly it's all because of Netanyahu, that's probably a bridge too far. The Palestinian leadership, you talk about new leadership. The Palestinian leadership on the West Bank, as you know, is a leadership that is very stuck in an old way of looking at things. And I'd remind you, they might tell their British interlocutors and others that they are moderates, but nearly 70 days after the terrible massacre on October 7th, they have failed to condemn that massacre. They've failed to do so. And even their foreign ministry 2 weeks ago, the official foreign ministry of the Palestinian Authority, it itself put out this ridiculous statement on official stationery saying that Israel was responsible for the deaths at the music festival. And so there are severe questions, very serious questions, about their commitment to peace and reconciliation.
OK, let me ask you about the visit there today by the US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. Is meeting with your Prime Minister at the moment. Your Prime Minister is reiterating this message, as we've heard from your Defence Secretary, that this conflict could continue for several weeks, if not months. How concerned are you by increasing criticism by the US in recent days of Israeli actions, of its failure to protect innocent civilian lives in Gaza? Do you think they will continue to support you for the weeks, possibly months ahead that you foresee this conflict going on for?
So this issue came up in our meetings today with the Americans, and our military people showed, not for the first time, to the United States, the rigorous process we have in how we select targets and how we authorize to hit a target. And there is as I said, a very rigorous process. Stage after stage must be met. And only then is a target decided that we can hit it with what is the ordinance and so forth. And we really do have such a process in place. The idea that Israel is somehow indiscriminately carpet bombing Gaza, this is simply just not true.
But there are increasing concerns from the US, from the UK. The UK Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak, said today he is concerned. He said far too many innocent people have lost their lives. Are you willing to continue this conflict with the large number of loss of life of civilians? You're justifying it there by saying that you are doing all you can to protect people, but increasing calls, increasing criticism from around the world, from your key allies. How much does that weigh on the decision-making process in the Israeli government?
Of course, what allies say to us, especially friends like in the United States and the United Kingdom, of course that affects our thinking, and we share with them our concerns. And the truth is, on the strategy, we have no disagreement. We agree. that Israel must defend itself against Hamas. We have the right and the obligation to protect our people. And we agree that Hamas's military machine must be destroyed, and we agree that Hamas cannot stay in power in Gaza. That is unsustainable. That's a recipe for further violence and further war. And we can disagree here and there, maybe on the tactics, and we listen and we can learn from each other. But we share the same goal. That is, as we pursue this campaign against Hamas, we will do our utmost to safeguard the civilian population, and we will do our utmost to facilitate the entrance of humanitarian support for that civilian population. Ultimately, the target of operation is the Hamas military machine. It's not Gaza's civilians.
OK, Mr. Regev, we do appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us on BBC News.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's speak now to